Wastelanders, Vault Dwellers, I've got some news for you. We know now about the acquisition of Bethesda and Zenimax Studios by Microsoft and the potential partnering of Obsidian and Bethesda, which could bring back the potential for something like New Vegas 2. But that's not all. This opens up the possibility for other things, which I am going to be detailing in this video. And who am I? I am Tom. I'm Robots. That's what I go by on the internet. I am the host of the Fallout Lorecast podcast, and I'm also one of the hosts of the Fallout Hub. You can check out all of that stuff at robotsradio.net, and you can follow me for live episodes and live streams at twitch.tv/robotsradio. So let's talk about the potential of Robert House coming back in Fallout 76. Now, I know you're thinking here, this is kind of a crazy idea.
Yeah, Robots, I think this is a really crazy, nuts, super dumb idea.
Well, okay, just go with me here, Buddy Bot. Listen, here's the idea. If we have Bethesda and Obsidian working together again, then we have the potential for something like New Vegas 2. But even if they just started working on that today, that's a 4 or 5 year project to make sure that we get a game that is polished and ready to go, and something that's not just going to launch and have a ton of bugs and people are going to complain about, right? It's going to take a while. So step number 1 would be, what if Obsidian were to work on expansion content for Fallout 76? They already have an engine, they already have assets, they already have things to start with in order to expand out. And based on the conversations that we've had with some of the developers on the Fallout Hub, this is something that they are working on. We know that they are adding more and more content to Fallout 76, and they are committed to adding more year over year over year. So to bring in somebody like Obsidian to work on content based around things that happened on the West Coast would make a lot of sense. To be able to open up the map, give us new places to explore, reasons to branch out into other locations. So let's take that idea and run with it. Then we have going back to the West Coast, going back to New Vegas, but it is the year 2102. In New Vegas, things don't happen for almost another 200 years into the future. So how do we fit Robert House into that equation? I mean, he's kind of the main focus in a lot of ways of the events of New Vegas, right? The strip being revised, all the robots coming out, all of the major events in New Vegas outside of things like the Hoover Dam, but including things like the Hoover Dam, are kind of initiated by the things that Robert House is doing. So how do you fit this into the storyline?
Well, Robert, wasn't Mr. House, he was unconscious. He's kind of like almost a dead guy laying in a coffin.
Yes, Buddy About. He's not awake yet, and it's almost 36 more years until he is woken up in the coffin.
What if we did something to get him started waking up?
Yeah, there you go. So what if we have an adventure in Fallout 76 where we have to head out into the West looking for technology for somebody like the Brotherhood, who is coming to 76, because there is a gap in the lore of a contingency of the Brotherhood that goes missing that we learn about in Fallout 1. I believe that's the group that's going to show up in Appalachia in 76, probably chasing technology and the things that they're looking for, trying to escape the terrors of the West Coast. They show up in Appalachia, and then we find out that there's more things to be discovered in Las Vegas because Las Vegas isn't hit by nukes, right? So now we have the potential of heading out and using the vertibirds or whatever the Brotherhood is using to head over to the Appalachian area to go back to Vegas before House has fixed it up, with raiders controlling the strip, all sorts of terrible things happening. Can you imagine what the strip looks like when it's all run by raiders who haven't been turned into the groups that are now running each of the individual buildings? We could totally go back with a search to try to find Robert House and initiate a wake up in order for him to come back and fix the events of the strip. Now, sure, this messes with the lore a little bit, but anything you do is going to mess with the lore. I mean, anything that you add at this point in the story is going to change some of the events, but there are holes that these things can fit into. I don't believe we know exactly the events that brought about Robert House's reawakening. I think it's assumed that he awoke because there was a time limit on his devices in order to wake him back up in the future, but there might be more to it than that. So that's where I think we're going with that.
But robots, do you think they'd actually do that? You think they'd actually take us back to New Vegas?
I think that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the other perspective here is take a look at Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online started adding new zones and those kinds of things pretty early on into the development of it. And one of the earliest that they decided to add in was Morrowind. Morrowind was a fan favorite game. That was there's so many people who play Elder Scrolls Online who cite Morrowind as their entry into the series and a place they'd love to go back to. So the buzz around going back to Morrowind was huge. It makes sense from a marketing standpoint to create some buzz and take us back to New Vegas, and even more buzz around this idea that we are going to be interacting with Mr. House, or at least working to wake him up, do something like that. I don't think it would be as much of a buzz to say something like the Legion is there, because they're not yet. That doesn't really make sense in the timeline. I don't think it makes as much sense either to talk about the NCR, because the NCR really isn't established yet in the timeline. It takes another 80 some years for them to really start developing and becoming a thing in the Wasteland and the West Coast. But a bunch of Raider gangs and Robert House could make a lot of sense. So that's where I'm going with that. I would love to hear some of your thoughts and some of your ideas on this. I think it's a really large potential. I think that there's also a lot more room for them to add the kinds of stuff into 76 that people really want to play if they're able to take us into some of these locations like the West Coast. This also means that there could be potential to go back to the Mariposa military base, to tie into some of the things that Roger Maxon is doing over on the West Coast in order to prepare the Brotherhood for what happens to be the situation that they're in Fallout 1. There's a lot of other places that we could go as well, being that it's only 20 some years after the bombs dropped. So I think that's one of the things that you can expect, is going to these other locations, and I hope we get to see Mr. House. All right, guys. I've been Robots. I've been sharing stuff on this video channel for a while now, and there's a whole bunch of episodes and things to check out about Fallout and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're interested, then drop a like, drop a subscription to the channel. You know how all that stuff works. If this has been helpful or informative in any way, I'd love for you to come back. All right. Talk to you guys later.